Yes, welcome in. It is finally game week for the Badgers. They will take on Western Michigan coming up on Friday night at Camp Randall Stadium, 8 o'clock kickoff. I know that makes Jesse very, very happy that it's in an 8 o'clock game. I know you don't have a deadline, so it's not like you're in a paper, but I don't think any of us are huge fans of that. But that's why media starts with a me and has an I in it. But it is game week. Finally, we get to see Wisconsin against another team.
Technically, there's no deadlines for a print edition, but obviously there are deadlines to meet in the internet world. And my favorite thing is going home at 3 in the morning on Saturday. It used to be in college, but it's a little different these days. SoCo.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So we will talk a little bit maybe about Western Michigan coming up on Tuesday. Again, for those who missed it, we talked about our schedule for the year. We're going to be doing episodes Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and that will obviously start today. Today's Sunday. So we're going to be doing our season preview of the 2024 campaign for Wisconsin today. And we're going to get to a number of topics, but I wanted to start today, Jesse, with something that you have a question about entering week one. I think that there are a number of ways you could go with this, but what is your biggest question for Wisconsin going into week one as Luke Fickell hopes to get things going in the right direction in his second year?
I'm going to go big picture on this, and there's a number of questions I could ask positionally, and I know we'll get into that. But I'm just thinking about offensively, how much different and more efficient is the offense this season? Because we know that nothing about last season met expectations, but especially from what we saw offensively, the fact that this team ended up averaging its fewest points per game in a season in 19 years. I did not have that on my bingo card. And I think that you and I both believe that there has been progress made, but what does that look like? And I know week one may not necessarily be the 100% indication of what we'll see, right? It's Western Michigan, it's not Alabama. But can they take the steps forward that show all of us that they're in a position to have success in year two?
Well, go back to week one of last year. I went back and looked at our season preview episode, and the biggest question in week one was the offense, and it still is. But you go back to that week one, and yes, it was Buffalo, but Tanner Mordecai threw a couple of interceptions. They didn't have a touchdown through the passing game. To me, that is it is Western Michigan, but we saw last year maybe we should have been a little bit more keen to the idea that maybe the passing game wasn't going to be as ready to go and hit the ground running as we thought it might be. And can they show that they have made improvements in the passing game? I don't care who it is. Tear up whoever it is. And again, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be the passing game. It can be the offense in general, but I need to see some flashes in the passing game to feel good about where they are as an offense, because we didn't really see very much of that against Buffalo.
There were no great moments or games in the non-conference season last year. Yes, they won two of those three. Obviously, we know what happened against Washington State. But even in the other two games that the Badgers won by 3 touchdowns, if you really examine what happened in those games, including Buffalo, they were tied or way too close in the second half, which was indicative of some of the issues we would see down the road. So I do think that is a substantial thing that we need to watch in week one is how different does it actually look?
Right. And again, I'm not going to sit here and if they go and throw for 300 yards against Western Michigan, I'm not going to be like, all right, well, everything's great. They're going to be an amazing offense, but I need to see some signs of it. I need to see some signs that we saw in the bowl game. I need that to kind of carry over and, getting all these different guys involved. And, there is certainly a number of weapons that I would like to see used, and how do they get them involved? Because, Tresh Kekahuna obviously was not a part of this offense against Buffalo last year. Bryson Green was in his first game. Vinny Anthony was not anywhere close to the top of the depth chart in terms of being and getting the ball a ton. But there's just, I want to see how they're going to use these guys, because we saw in fall camp and in spring that they have some explosive playmakers, and how do they get them involved, and how does it look even against a team like Western Michigan that's coming off a 4-8 season and whose defense was not very good last year. So that for me is probably my biggest question going into week one. All right, fast forward to the end of the year. Who's the best player on this team at the end of the year?
I think it's obvious choices in my mind at this point
You get
offensively.
you get a choice.
All right,
I don't
well,
know.
then
I
I'll
don't. I
say,
don't know why. I don't know why you went plural there.
well, offense and defense, it's such a different thing, but I'll say Hunter Wohler then. I mean, I
Um,
don't see any reason why the numbers won't be what they were last year. And I know some people look at it and say, "Oh, a safety's getting 120 tackles." Well, does that mean there have been some bad teams over the years at Wisconsin, and you see guys racking up tackles? It's because they can't stop anybody. I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. We know how versatile he is. I just think he's in position to have a really good year, and they can move him around, which we saw last year. So I mean, I'm inclined to think he's a first team All Big Ten type of player, but I also think Will Pauling is that on offense. So it's like it's hard for me to pick one side or the other because they do such different things, and I think they can be equally impactful on their sides of the ball.
Yeah, since you took two, I guess I'll scrounge around and and find.
Is there anybody left?
No, I'm kidding. I think Will Pauling is an obvious answer on the offensive side of the ball, just because of what we saw last year. Are there some other potential guys that could jump up and not just maybe not overtake him, but be in the conversation? Could one of the offensive linemen do that? Could one of the running backs do that? Could Tyler Van Dyke find his 2021 form and all of a sudden we're talking about him as a potential draft pick? Like Will Pauling's the obvious choice, but could somebody else challenge him there on the offensive side?
Yes, absolutely. And if we're having this conversation about Tyler Van Dyke, then it's going to be one hell of a season. I truly believe
Yeah.
that. If he's the best player on the team, then it means that everyone around him is having success, and it means he has recaptured the form that he found in 2021. I've got a story coming out this week on the Athletic about him and his path here, and obviously he feels like he's in a really good position. And if he can stay healthy and replicate some of the things they did offensively at Miami in 2021, we've seen some of the things he can do in practice. I think his ceiling is very high, but you got to go and do it. And it's a leap at this point to say he's going to go from being the starting quarterback to being the best player on the team, but it's not impossible.
You never know. And this has been an accountability off season for us, I feel like. Would you agree with that? We're kind of holding ourselves accountable for last year. Uh, Last year's answers were Tanner Mordecai. That was your answer. Jack Nelson and Jack Nelson was my answer. So I don't know that we hit those. But I will say, you know, Jack Nelson talent wise, he could be like at some point, but he obviously did not have the season he wanted to have. Riley Mullman could be at some point, if he's healthy and able to play. Those are possibilities. Ches Malusi, could he all of a sudden find his form of where he was at last year? We kind of started to see some flashes in fall camp. I just think there's a lot of options on offense, that it's not just Will Pauling is the answer and guaranteed answer. It's an easy one right now just because of what he did last year, for sure. Defensively, Ricardo Hallman, I think, is probably another one that you could sit there and say, the dude had 7 interceptions last year. He's a preseason All-American. Will teams still challenge him, or will they go after Nazir Forkrane and the other corners on this team? And I think they're better set up to deal with that. But Ricardo Hallman, if they do test him, could have another big time season. And if they don't test him, that I think speaks even more to what they think of him as a player. So I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think we should at least touch on this before we move on, because I probably should have touched on it in the biggest questions entering week one, and that is on the defensive line with James Thompson Jr. and what is nothing official from the program yet, but it certainly sounds like he's going to be out for an extended period of time with an injury, and so that completely throws, I think, a lot of our thoughts on that group into question even more, because we knew James Thompson Jr. He was the one proven aspect of that defensive line. Kurt Neal had played a little bit, Ben Barton has played, but he was the guy, and now he's not. And you're going to be asking some other guys to step up, and it was a huge question coming into the season. It's an even bigger question now.
Yeah, two things on the best player at the end of the year. I think if it's a good sign about your team if there are 4 or 5 guys that could be in that conversation on either side of the ball. And I think there's other guys we haven't even mentioned, like Jake Chaney and Jaheim Thomas could both be those guys. And you're right, if they test or don't want to test Hallman, I think it could be Forkurian too, just with the numbers he's capable of putting up. So that's at least a good sign going into the season. And when you initially asked my biggest question, my first thought went to the defensive line, but I wanted to go bigger picture. but it's hard to ignore. James Thompson Jr. is the only guy who's coming back who had more than a sack last year. And so you're putting a lot more on guys like Kurt Neal and Ben Barton. And I think now you're asking those transfers that you got. This is why you went and got them. They were clearly going to be a part of the rotation, but they're going to be even more impactful now. Elijah Hills, Brandon Lane, and Cade McDonald. And if you want to play 6, which is what they've consistently talked about, then who does that become? Is it a Dylan Johnson who started to get some reps with the 2s? That's not off the table. So they have felt better about the depth, but this changes everything up front because you knew what you had in Thompson. He was the most consistent playmaker, and they need some other guys to be more dynamic.
Yeah. So we at least needed to address that. I should have addressed that in the open. All right. Wisconsin's toughest game on its schedule this year is?
I'm going to go with Oregon. I'm conflicted on this because the first thing that comes to mind is, Alabama. It's week 3. Wisconsin hasn't played anybody at this point. And so that certainly is a viable option. I just think Oregon is ultimately going to be the best team that Wisconsin faces during the regular season. And that's going to be a challenge. If there's anything that Wisconsin has going for it, it's the potential that this could be a night game and the fact that Wisconsin will, at least at that point, have been tested. But for the sake of picking a single game, I'm going with Oregon.
It's also later in the season, potential for colder weather as well. That I don't know if that helps Wisconsin anymore, but certainly, and I'm not saying there's not cold weather in Oregon. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying when it comes to November football, maybe it's perhaps a little bit colder in Wisconsin. That said, I think you could certainly make the case for Oregon. You could make the case for Penn State. You could make the case for Iowa, maybe USC, but to me, it's Alabama because it's still Alabama. We talked, Alabama has been the team for the last 20 years almost, right? Since Nick Saban came back. And again, I know he's not there, but what Kalen DeBoer did at Washington is amazing. Taking a program that had such high and lofty history dating back into the 90s and then getting them back to the championship game. I don't know that they're going to hit the ground running and be the Alabama that they were against Nick Saban, but that's a huge game because they haven't been tested. Wisconsin will not have been tested yet. They will have a lot of expectations and pressure on them because of trying to show that the program is going in the right direction. And it's just Alabama. You know what I mean? I know Oregon's talented as hell, but just for the sake of argument, I'm going to go with Alabama.
Both good choices and both indicative of how insane the schedule is for Wisconsin, that they, by the way, still have to play at Iowa, at USC, and home against Penn State, and also have the other teams that have been a challenge in recent years too.
Yes. That said, easiest game on Wisconsin's schedule.
I want to say South Dakota, but I feel like that is very tricky because they're a top 5 FCS team, and I remember Northern Iowa in 2012 when Danny O'Brien had his first start, and that game was not decided until late, and maybe we should have realized that that was maybe not the best Wisconsin team. Somehow still won the Rose Bowl, but it's
won the
Big Ten championship, not the Rose Bowl. But I'm sure there's a Big Ten game in there that you might be able to say.
Well, I mean, look, as you just mentioned before, you kind of threw it in at the end of your other answer. The games that used to be guarantees are no longer guarantees. So you can't just sit here and say Minnesota. I mean, it hasn't been those have been good games for the last 6 years. Go back and say Rutgers. Nope, that's the team that a lot of people are picking ahead of Wisconsin in these polls. Northwestern. I think Northwestern was the game that I chose as this last year. And obviously I think I might've gone Indiana Northwestern, which was, a fantastic pick by me. So but Northwestern in, that little Lincoln Log Stadium that they're putting together down in Evanston for 1 year. No, I'm not going to sit here and say that's going to be easy. So I think the answer probably is Western Michigan or Purdue because they've beaten Purdue every single year. I feel like there's probably a handful of guys that were born on this team that were actually alive the last time that Wisconsin lost to Purdue. Famously, Braylon Allen ran all over them, and he was not born previously to, or he had not yet been born the last time that Purdue won and beat the Badgers, and that was in 2003. So I would say Western Michigan or Purdue for me. South Dakota State, the FCS teams, we saw Montana State come back and upset New Mexico State, or maybe New Mexico last night. They're a top 5 team in the FCS. South Dakota was, I think, 5th in the first ranking. So I don't know that that's going to be as easy of a game as everyone's projecting. I think Western Michigan probably is the answer, but it's game 1, so you just really never know exactly what it's all going to look like. So that's kind of tough. But I'd probably say Western Michigan. I think Western Michigan's fair. All right, most important game on Wisconsin's schedule.
I asked this question to fans and subscribers. We did a preseason poll or summer poll, just getting the pulse of the fan base. And what I found most interesting is their answer was, if I'm not mistaken, Iowa, and Minnesota was number 2. And I think it was separated by 1 vote. So for all the talk that we are engaging in and everyone else is about the challenging schedule, what seems to matter most are those rivalry games, the ones that you've seen every year where Wisconsin has started to take a dip. And so I guess I'll go Iowa because of what it can mean for Big Ten and just what it has meant historically, even though I'm conflicted on it because I want to say Alabama. But it doesn't really have a bearing on like the Big Ten season. And I'm going to talk myself out of this answer, but I'm just going to say Iowa because I know you won't say Iowa.
Yeah, I'm not going to say Iowa. I'm not going to say Minnesota. I think it's Alabama. Like if last season had gone differently, if last season was like 10-2 or 9-3, and things were pointing up, I think the opportunity that's available for them against Alabama is just at a different level. Like they have an opportunity to not just show that they're improved, but announce their presence as a program that matters on a national level again. And that game against Alabama gives them that opportunity. And so it's a huge, important game. I don't think Wisconsin's going to win the Big Ten this year. So like when we talk about Iowa and Minnesota, those are very, very important games. And probably, if they beat Alabama and then lose those other 2, maybe I'm talking a little bit differently or feeling about it a little bit differently. But I don't think they're going to lose to Minnesota. And I think, Iowa's certainly going to be favored in that game, probably. I know it's later in the year, but that Alabama game is just such a huge, huge, huge opportunity to reestablish yourself as a program that matters. That sounded bad. That's not what I meant. Reestablish yourself as someone that people are going to have to talk about and think about and worry about. And, these last couple of years have kind of just maybe tamped that down a little bit. But the Alabama game gives you that opportunity.
Yeah.
So maybe if this was biggest opportunity game, maybe that'd be Alabama would be a better answer. But I'm still going to stick with it.
I want to say that among the responses, and it was almost 1,000, that Alabama ended up 4th. It was Iowa, Minnesota, and then Penn State. But I also think it has a lot to do with people being traditionalists and what they're used to seeing. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. I always think I'm saying that to play devil's advocate, but there's no doubt, especially from a non-conference perspective, non-conference home games, what gets bigger than playing Alabama? I mean, they played a top 5 Nebraska team 50 years ago. These types of opportunities rarely come along. And I do think that if Wisconsin should beat Alabama, it changes everything about how we view this program, about how this team is perceived nationally. And I know that's what you mean by it matters. It matters to the people who are fans now, but
right.
It don't matter as a program nationally because they haven't for the last few years and haven't been in the conversation of a playoff. And if they're 3-0 and have beaten Alabama, then they're firmly in that conversation. And it establishes Luke Fickell as that's why Wisconsin went and got him to elevate them to a new level. And now they're here.
Yeah, it's been 5 years since Wisconsin's been in the conversation for the playoff, and
yes,
that conversation went away very, very quickly when they lost to Illinois that year. So this is a chance, and the playoff, you're going to be in the conversation more because of it being 12 teams, but just a huge, huge opportunity for them. Potential trap game on Wisconsin's schedule.
Well, even though I said South Dakota was the easiest, I think it's South Dakota. It's just hard to deny what's on the horizon there. I can't consider really any Big Ten team a trap game necessarily, just because they're all really tough. But that is a game that I think if you're caught looking ahead and thinking about what's possible, let's say you have a really good performance against Western Michigan on a Friday night. Oh, here comes this FCS team. We don't know much about them. We think we're going to roll out the helmets and win. And I'm not saying that they'll prepare that way. And I absolutely know Luke Fickell won't tell the team anything of the sort. But if you're not at your best, we've seen this with other programs, you can lose. And all of a sudden you're looking around going, well, what are we going to do now? Because we got to go play Alabama.
Yeah, that South Dakota game, if you're going to pick anything on the schedule, probably would be it. You look through it. There's not like last year. You could have said Indiana because they were playing coming off. I think they were coming off the Ohio State game, or I think we had a huge discussion about the Illinois game because it was the Ohio State was next week, and I think you said Illinois was a potential trap game, and because of what had happened the previous year, I don't know that we thought the same. But to me, you're right. There's no Big Ten team that you could sit here and say you could overlook certainly because of what happened last year, losing to Indiana, losing to Northwestern, like almost losing to Illinois. There's just not teams that you can overlook at this point and say this is a guaranteed win and you can just roll the helmets out. And so South Dakota would probably be the closest thing to it, but I don't. It's a perfect trap game, is it not? Like it is the definition of, especially if they go out and smack the heck out of Western Michigan on Friday and they're feeling really good about themselves, and then they know what's coming a week later. It's the definition of a trap game, but we'll see how they handle it. The game you're most looking forward to?
Alabama, no question about it. It would be special even if it was at a neutral site like 2015 or when they played LSU, and obviously they had one at Lambeau, but just the chance to have a home and home where it's in Madison and then in Tuscaloosa. Like we were saying before, those opportunities don't come along very often. It would have been cool just from an atmosphere perspective if it was at night. I think it's going to be a little bit different at 11 a.m., but that's still Alabama out there, and that is going to be fun.
This may go into the next one, but I think USC is a game to look forward to simply because of the trip, like the history of the Coliseum, and it being like Wisconsin's played USC before, obviously played them back in 2015 in San Diego, but it's one of the blue bloods, and it's a blue blood that you don't necessarily get to see a lot, and so I think that's exciting. But I think that probably goes into trip we're most looking forward to, and I would assume it's LA for you. Or no?
I don't even know the answer to this one. Evanston is the closest. I
forgot about this.
Yeah. I actually want to see that stadium. I mean, they're all work trips, man. It's not like I'm going partying out in LA.
But it's the Coliseum, dude. It's the history. It's the USC. It's the pageantry around it.
I get all that. It'll be nice to go to LA. I'll be the only person, the voice of dissent, that's just going to say Evanston for the reason being it's closest.
I like that. That is a total. I mean, that's an absolute Jesse answer. That is if the quintessential Jesse answer is that one, which whatever's closest, even though you still have to drive to Chicago, and drive through Chicago, or I guess not all the way through, but you know what I mean. Like Evanston is the trip that I like least look forward to, other than Rutgers, and so like New Jersey's. Yeah.
Here's the other.
This always happens. This always happens that we start talking about New Jersey, and I just want to say the meanest things about New Jersey, but then I know that there's going to be people out there going to be like, New Jersey is actually a really great place. My experiences in New Jersey have not been necessarily as good as some others, people that live there. I'm going to say that going to Rutgers is not my favorite trip.
So here's the other thing that I would say. One thing I do enjoy about the road trips are going to places that are actual college towns where you can feel the college environment and kind of get washed in that. And like, that's not LA. That's not to say that there aren't a bunch of USC supporters and that the stadium is going to be cool. But like, if they were playing at Oregon, I'd probably have that at the top. Just going to Eugene, getting an opportunity to experience Outson Stadium. And there's a handful of other schools that I feel that way about. And I also think the most looking forward to is something you haven't done in some way. And though I have been to Evanston, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who's just intrigued by what it's going to be like watching a game in a makeshift stadium with 15,000 people, where if the action sucks, at least I can look at Lake Michigan.
You're not going to be the only one that says that. There are other people in the Badger realm that have made it clear that they are so excited about that stadium, but I just can't find the juice for it, man. I just can't. I'll find the juice for it when they open the new stadium, because the new stadium actually looked pretty cool, and their old stadium was not. So, but yeah, I mean, again, as I've said a couple of times, I hope it's the coldest day that's ever happened in Chicago history. I hope the wind is blowing all over the place. I hope we get rain. Like, I just hope all those things just so you can't enjoy the trip to Evanston. But yes, I think LA is a great trip. When they go to Washington, I think that, to me, Washington is going to be a really fun and interesting place to go to. I'd like to experience the stuff that you haven't experienced, and I think going up there, and I know that's not necessarily a college town, but it's certainly a team that rallies around, or a community that rallies around the team. But Oregon probably is up there too. But this year, LA for sure. Which position do you have the most confidence in?
This is a good question.
Not position, unit. I guess we'll go position, unit position, and then maybe overall, I guess.
Because the O-line is a unit and not left tackle.
Yeah. Well, I was also thinking like offense, defense, special teams, but let's go position group first, and then we'll go. Then we can go the other one.
Okay.
Position group you have the most confidence in.
I'm going to go with, I'll say outside linebacker. But those top three better stay healthy, because we've seen what happened this preseason. I know I've talked about those three regularly here this preseason. I just think that they've got a chance to be difference makers in a way that we didn't see last season, and in a way that we sort of grew accustomed to seeing for a handful of years at Wisconsin.
So this is a tough one. I think. Every group that we've talked about, I think, is deeper than it was last year, outside of defensive line. Now that they're dealing with some injury issues. I could make an argument for corner. I think I could make an argument for safety. But I think I'm going to go running back.
Yeah.
Is that off the reservation? Ches Malusi is proven, but he's obviously got some injury problems. But Tui Walker, Jackson Aker, Cade Yakimelli, Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree, like, just on down the list, I think that they'll be okay and good if any of those guys has to play. And again, I know Jackson Aker and Cade Yakimelli were not necessarily, great in reserve, or I should say great when Braylon and Ches went out last year, but I think they're better players now, and I have more confidence in them. And certainly the two young guys, I think we're going to see, and I really can't wait to see both of them. I think if I can't pick outside linebacker, which I don't even know if I would, just because of the depth issues behind those guys, I would say running back is a group that I have a lot of confidence in.
I'd put running back as probably the position I'm most interested in seeing, like how it unfolds. And the confidence thing is tough, because I can say, well, I have confidence in outside linebackers, but if someone gets hurt, everything changes. And I can make that argument like against the running backs. Ches hasn't been healthy for a full season in any of his 3 years. Can Tui Walker actually handle the full load? Certainly looks like it. And as you mentioned, Jackson and Cade, it's not like they put up big numbers last year. And if you're using them, do you have enough dynamic playmakers? The freshmen would come in there, but like, what exactly does that look like? Can they handle Big Ten football on a consistent basis? So like, I see reason for optimism there, and I can understand why that'd be a unit to have a lot of confidence in. It's just, I still have questions about how that one comes together.
Yeah. I just think you can throw so many guys at it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there are just so many options you can throw at it that it gives you confidence that at least one or two of them are going to be able to produce.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's fair.
yeah. Some over-unders here for you, Jesse. Over under 33.5 touchdowns for Tyler Van Dyke. No, I'm messing with you. I'm messing with you. We did that last year. We're not going to do that again this year. Over under 18.5 touchdowns for Tyler Van Dyke.
Ooh, that is a good number. He had 25 TDs when he was the ACC Rookie of the Year, 6 picks. I'm going to take the over on
Okay.
that one. I think it'll be close. Look, even last year at Miami, he finished with 19 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. Now he had 11 touchdowns and 1 interception through 4 games, and obviously the everything came undone. Though he did play pretty well the last 2 games after coming back from the injury and the benching. So if that's what can happen during there's no other way to put it. It was kind of a dysfunctional season at Miami. It really was. So if he can do that, then I think that's certainly realistic at Wisconsin.
How many touchdowns did Tanner Mordecai throw last year? How many touchdowns did they combine for last year? It was like
Yeah,
13,
it was
14?
far below the number you're laying out. But I think they're further along as an offense, and I think his ceiling is there.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be further along. If they're not better than they were last year in the passing game, I don't know how
God help us all.
I don't know how fans are going to be able to watch football this year. Wisconsin's leading rusher. I'm not putting a name on it. Over under 850 yards.
Over.
Okay.
I think somebody's going to get 1,000 yards.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay. Who?
I guess I will go Ches. He was close a couple years ago. This is obviously assuming he stays healthy. But the reason that this would be a challenge is that there could be pretty close to a split.
Yes. And I think it's also who stays healthy and maybe the guys coming along, younger guys coming along and taking some snaps and some reps and some carries away from older guys. I think I'm going to take the under on it. I would say, but 850 is not just like something to sneeze at either. I think Braylon was right around there last year. So yeah, I'm going to take the under on that one. Will Pauling, over under 64.5 catches.
That's much harder than 74.5.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go under.
Okay.
I'm gonna agree with Luke on this one. That if he's got the 74, that doesn't bode well for the offense, even though he's very clearly the best wide receiver. And I think Tretch will take away some of those catches, but that is a good thing. So it'll be close.
I'm going to take the under. Well, you know what? No, I'm going to take the over. Look, he is the best receiver on this team. And when it comes down to making a play, what we saw in fall camp was Tyler Van Dyke was going to go to Will Pauling. Now, teams know that as well. And so perhaps it opens up opportunities for a Tretch, for a Bryson Green, for a Vinny Anthony, for a CJ Williams, for whoever is on the field, the tight ends, whatever it is. But I still think Will Pauling is going to be like that guy. He still is that guy. So I think he's still going to get his catches. And, maybe it won't be 65 or 64.5, but I still feel like they're going to target him a ton. Tretchka Kahuna, over under 36.5 catches.
Wow. I'll take the under. The 64.5 is, I'm trying to do the math here, like 5.5 catches a game. And then if assuming it's just 12-game regular season, I think Tretch will be an impact playmaker, but there's such a balance to strike here. Will is still, to me, going to be the leading receiver on this team. I just think that, like, even if Tretch has 30 catches, then that's 30 opportunities that Will doesn't have, but that can still be tremendously impactful.
So, do you know how many catches Skylar Bell had last year?
He actually had a lot.
Yes. He
But
had 38 catches.
They didn't go for big yardage, and there were some big plays that they kind of whiffed on.
Yes. He had 38 catches last year.
Yeah.
I think Tretch is going to top that. So I'm going to take the over on that number. And he's also, I guarantee you, I will guarantee it right now. I don't know what I could do to, um, like, I don't know what I could put up for if it doesn't happen, but there's just no way he doesn't have more than 296 yards on those catches, which is what Skylar Bell had. He averaged 7.8 yards per catch. He had 296 yards on those 38 catches. There's just no way that Tretch doesn't have more yards than that. As long as he's healthy, as long as he plays the entire season. I mean, there's no way in my mind that it's anything less than what Skylar Bell had last year. Ricardo Hallman, over under 4.5 interceptions. He had 7 last year.
I'm gonna take the under.
Because
That's a hard number to attain in consecutive seasons. Now that it's out there, I just kind of feel like other teams are going to try and pick and choose their spots in other areas. And there's just, even if he has as good of a season, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to equate to 5-6 interceptions. He could have more pass breakups. He could have more tackles. He could just have more times where they don't even throw it to him because he's blanketing a guy. So I think there's going to be some opportunities for some other guys.
4.5 interceptions for a corner at Wisconsin is a lot, or not 4.5, but like more than 4.5 is a lot. Like, it doesn't happen very often for a cornerback. Safeties have had numbers, but corners at Wisconsin, at least in the last decade, have not necessarily put up huge interception numbers. So I'm going to take the under as well. That's not to say that he's not going to be good, but I just think I think the under makes sense here. And last one, Wisconsin's leading sacker, over under 6.5.
I'm gonna go over.
And
I can't.
who?
I will say John Pius.
Okay.
I mean, I can't sit here and talk about the linebackers and what we've seen and not go over whatever number you're going to throw out there. And I mean, what did CJ Getz had? Was it 5.5?
No, Daryl Peterson led them with 4.5.
Okay. So
6.5. I mean, 6.5 is an easy number, I think.
Yeah, I just think they're way better positioned to have more sacks this year.
Yeah, I'm going to say over as well, but I'm also going to. I think I'm going to go with DP. I think I'm going to go with Daryl Peterson as the leading guy. But I also think there's going to be multiple guys that are going to be right around that 6.5 number this year. But I think DP ends up leading them. But they are in such a better spot getting after the quarterback with those other two guys than what they had at that position last year. Now, this whether they can stop the run is still just a huge question. And it didn't get any easier with the loss of James Thompson Jr. But those guys are obviously are going to be very good pass rushers, but they have to hold up in the run game too. And that's certainly what CJ Getz was probably more known for than getting after the quarterback. I don't know how you feel about that. Is that still to me, that's still a huge question for them defensively?
Yeah, it's going to be until we see these games. There's so many questions.
Yeah. What's your one bold prediction? Do you have a bold prediction for 2024?
I feel like you have one since you came up with these, and it'll give me time to come up with an answer. So do you have one?
So my bold prediction, like I want my bold prediction to beat Alabama. We did this last year. Both of our bold predictions was they're going to beat Ohio State. And they actually, of all the games that they played last year in that stretch, that was probably the best they played, right? Was against Ohio State, had that game within a touchdown in the fourth quarter. So I don't know that was a horrible pick. The one bold prediction for me, I guess, would be one of the freshman running backs ends up being the guy. Whether it's Darren Dupree or Dylan Jones, one of those two guys ends up being the guy by the end of the year and jumps up and grabs it and is the next great Wisconsin running back as a freshman that leads into the next couple of years.
Is this, you can be the judge on this. Is this a bold enough prediction? Tyler Van Dyke will be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten this year.
The Big Ten is not stacked with great quarterbacks this year.
What number would I need to get to? 3 best quarterbacks? Which is gonna be tough because Dylan Gabriel's in this league.
Dylan Gabriel's in this league. Will Howard, obviously, what you have in Raiola. There are a number of solid quarterbacks, but so many like some of the guys that were here last year are no longer here.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. I mean, I think for it to be bold, you'd have to say he's, I guess, top 3 would make sense.
All right.
I
I'll say he's
guess.
the 3rd best quarterback in the Big Ten from a
What does that mean?
Statistically, it's hard to say. I think pass efficiency rating, obviously, like that's another thing is it's small sample size, but you look at the first 4 games last season, and that included a win against Texas A&M. He was number 2 in the country in pass efficiency rating, and the only guy ahead of him was Caleb Williams, who was the reigning Heisman Trophy winner and the number 1 NFL draft pick. So, like, it's there for him. I just, again, I'm not sitting here and saying that is the version you're going to see, but I think that is the ceiling. I think he can be a top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten this season.
I think the other bold prediction for me would be Xavier Lucas ending up as eventually joining the first team defense at some point this year. And those are, I don't know if that's necessarily bold because we saw him moving up the ranks late in fall camp, not necessarily getting a ton of first team reps, but we saw him a little bit. There were a few moments there, but him, I think just as he gets more seasoned, it's going to be a situation where they feel like they have to get him on the field. So that would be my second bold prediction. But the other one is the fresh running back, one of the freshman running backs, whether it's Dylan Jones or Darren Dupree, ends up being the guy by the end of the season.
I look forward to when we hold ourselves accountable in December and we went like 1 for 7 or something like that.
Oh, I mean, 1 for 7 would be an improvement on last year. So, all right. Season record prediction.
Well, I'm not going to turn my back on what I said earlier when we went game by game. I said 7-5. I know you said 8-4, so I'm going to stick with that until they show me something different.
What game could make you change your mind? Is it the Alabama game?
Oh, yeah. Everything changes if they beat Alabama. It just does, because then it means the games that I thought that they were going to be toss-ups don't feel like toss-ups anymore. And maybe that's not even the case, because you end up being a prisoner of the moment, and 1 week doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, now they're going to beat Penn State and they're going to beat Oregon. But I just think that game has the potential to change everything, that what we think about this program, the actual trajectory, what Luke Fickell is capable of here. So all bets are off if they beat Alabama and are 3-0, because then they'll be a top 15 team in the country going off a bye week and going into USC.
I mean, if they're 3-0 and they just beaten a top 10 Alabama team, I feel like they may be even top 10.
They might be, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that game could obviously change everything. I guess I'll stick with 8-4. I once again think they're going to jump up and grab one of their 4 and one of the 4 teams that are viewed as, really good teams. I think they're going to jump up and grab one of them. I don't know if it'll be Alabama or Penn State or Oregon or USC, or maybe I guess you could throw Iowa in there as well. But I think of those 5 games that they play against those teams, I think they have a chance to jump up and grab at least one of them. If I'm putting it on in terms of like the best chance of doing it, I think USC might be the best chance of doing it, just because I don't think they're going to have a great defense. A lot of people are just saying that, they got rid of Alex Grinch and all of a sudden they're going to be great on defense. Lincoln Riley has never been great on defense. Like, it doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator has been with Lincoln Riley and his team. They just haven't been very good for the most part. So I don't know that it's just going to be a 1-year fix. So I think that's certainly a possibility. And then I think Penn State potentially at home. You just never know. But there's so many opportunities to have a special season for Wisconsin, and yet you're probably right when it's going to be 7-5 or 8-4. No double digits this year for us.
No, we're not doing that. And I think I mentioned this previously, but in that survey, 7-5 and 8-4 were the top 2 answers. So I think that sort of falls in line with what the belief is. But I would also say if they actually, like, if Tyler Van Dyke is the top 3, even top 5 quarterback in the league, like, they're not going 7-5. They've got a chance to do something else. And that, I think at this point for Wisconsin, that's kind of all you want, is put yourself in a position to have a chance. And I'm not going to say the Paul Chryst have a chance to have a chance, even though I just said it. So I'm not saying that.
just give yourself a chance to have a chance. And Wisconsin, so many chances this season with the games that are on their schedule. And looking forward to jumping into it on Friday night with Western Michigan. We'll be back on Tuesday, discuss what Luke Fickell had to say in advance of his second home opener as Wisconsin's coach. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.